All right, boys, welcome to episode 56 of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, round two of video edition. We ready to get started on this thing?
Let's do it.
All right. So say we all, once I find the sounder. Joys of live video with screen magnifiers. Here we go. Not the right sounder, Malone. Not the right sounder up Malone at all.
Time to go get you the little switchboard.
I know, man. Well, I'm still poor, so we're playing with what we got. All right, take two, I think.
The following is a production of Shark Flight Media.
Now entering the nexus of geekery and guy world in 3, 2, 1, mark.
Do you know what the secret of life is? One thing. Just one thing.
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
This is the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast.
Hey, kids, welcome back to the latest edition of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, video edition, presented by our good friends over at Chris Kennedy Publishing. As always, you know where they're at, folks. It's ChrisKennedyPublishing.com. Doesn't matter what you're into, if it's military, sci-fi, space opera, paranormal romance, urban fantasy, even books about the craft, they got it all over there. So slide over to ChrisKennedyPublishing.com. Make sure you sign up for their mailing list. Get yourself a free ebook while you're at it, and keep tabs on all the weekly news that's happening there. Trust me, it is a lot of it. Also want to say thanks to our friends over at the Believe Podcast Network, of whom we are affiliated. If you want to know more about their shows, man, they got them all. Whether it's politics you're into, whether it's mysteries, conspiracy theories, pop culture, they are the #1 podcast network on the set for professionals, or on the net, rather, for professionals. So check them out at BLEAV.com. Again, that's BLEAV.com. They are the Believe Podcast Network. Well, we got guests coming up here in just a second, but before we get to him, I do want to say hi to my guys. Rob, Kevin, how are we doing this fine evening, sirs?
I'm doing good.
Yeah. What's happening over in Georgia tonight?
I'm back home. I went to Tupelo, Mississippi last week and did the old con thing. So
how'd
just
that
good
go?
to be back home and you know, just good to be home.
How did Tupelo Con go? Was that a good one?
It is good. It is a pop culture con, so it is not just for authors and that kind of thing. Everything was there, including wrestling. Saturday night had the ring set up right behind us, so that was cool.
Nice.
Yeah, Rock and Roll Express, their farewell tour, it was going on.
All right, cool.
So,
always a nice thing when they set up a wrestling ring at a con.
Yeah. Well, it was that night, and they made everybody leave. Then everybody comes in and they, sell tickets all over again. It was all right. It's a good con.
Cool. Rob, how about you, man? What's happening? Looks like you're on the road tonight.
I am. I'm in Council Bluffs, Iowa at the moment. I am on my way to a family reunion. This is going to be the fun one, right? This is the first family reunion with the 33-day-old wife. I will meet a whole host of people. I will never remember anybody's names. And then on Sunday, I'm going to be like, let me go. There'll be so many people. She's got
Tell them you're legally blind if they get upset that you didn't remember their names. Just I take it from my experience. That one works every time. Bit of awkwardness, but it's fun.
I'm a lot more likely to get away with legally dumb.
Cool deal. Well, we had a good weekend down in Florida. Had a chance to get a bunch of book stuff, podcast stuff done on Friday in time to check out for the beautiful city of Pensacola. It was a good friend of mine's birthday this past weekend. And so we celebrated by taking in a show, which was surprisingly better than I thought it was going to be. His wife got tickets to this group out of Pensacola called the White Tie Rock Ensemble. And I looked them up online. I was like, okay, local guys seem to be, pretty good chops, sound pretty good. Hey, for what we paid for tickets, let's just all go and have a nice nostalgic night. And, basically what these guys do is they will pick a theme. So this tour, this round, it was 80s, 70s and 80s arena rock. So it was lots of covers of, let me see if I can remember, Foreigner, Styx, Van Halen, Journey, and Boston. And so, yeah, so I was like, okay, well, this will be fun. It's like a great night at karaoke with a band, lots of sing-alongs, yada, yada. These guys completely blew my freaking mind. Like, this was a stacked show. Light show. They had a big screen behind the band showing the actual music videos when those were available, like right now from Van Halen. Just superb musicianship. The kid playing Eddie Van Halen nailed it note for note. So anyway, I say all that to say it was a great show. If you're in Pensacola and you can grab tickets to the White Tie Rock Ensemble, please go and enjoy. Those guys are fantastic. If you want to know more about them, you can hit my Facebook page. I got some videos posted up, and go enjoy those, especially the Van Halen. I was very happy that they didn't go all David Lee Roth. Like, they actually gave me a couple of Sammy tunes, which made me happy. Well, in addition to music, one of the other things we like to talk a lot about on this show is food, specifically barbecue. And I have been chomping at the bit for months, guys, if not years, to finally get a pro on this show to talk about that most hallowed of topics with me. Lo and behold, I never knew that one of my good author colleagues, kind of video tech colleagues, was an expert on this subject, and is in fact a registered member with the Kansas City Barbecue Society. So he said, Ian, I'll happily come on your show and talk some Q with you. So without further ado, we welcome to the show Mr. Jim Nettles, author, podcaster, video tech entrepreneur, author advocate. There's like a gazillion other titles that you go by, man. Welcome to Dudes and Hypers. There you go.
Yeah, just use the easy one, troublemaker.
Well, welcome to Dudes and Hyperspace, man. Thanks for coming on.
No, thanks guys for having me on. Talking about a couple of my favorite topics.
Yeah. Well, another thing that Jim is known for, and we're going to touch upon this during our conversation over the next half hour as well, is he is very into the virtual fan convention space. And as everybody knows, kind of when the pandemic hit, a lot of cons went virtual and have maintained a video component in their convention scene moving on, doing sort of a hybrid thing. And he was very much at the front end of that when it all happened, with a con that we're going to talk about later called Con-Tinual. But first, man, I do want to start out with barbecue. You and I have talked quite a bit about this off air since, but obviously the fans weren't privy to that. So let's start from the top, man. How did you get into loving barbecue the way that you do?
Well, number one, I'm from the South, so it is a religion,
right?
And so you got to go with what faith you were brought up in. So I grew up in a small country grocery store. Spent part of my teenage years working in butcher shop. So, I mean, I grew up around it.
Yeah.
I knew a bunch of the folks that had all the local barbecue places. We raised pigs out behind the store. So yeah, I've been kind of raised around that idea of barbecue, and I'm not exactly small, and it's not all just beer. So, barbecue is just one of those things that you kind of get raised on. And having traveled for a lot of years, because I spent about 20 years on the road pretty heavy. It's always fun to go and have those debates about what is barbecue depending on where you're at.
Sure.
And but now I've been cooking since I was a young teenager and was pretty much raised in it. So you could probably go with the idea of pretty much born to it.
Awesome. Well, now you just said you're from the Carolinas. How does a Carolina boy go about getting involved with the Kansas City Barbecue Society?
Accidentally.
Okay.
So we were talking about doing some other bigger cooks and stuff like this. And actually the fun part behind it was, for Christmas one year, Dad bought going to the workshop for himself, of course, me and my brother-in-law. So the three of us took and went and did the workshop, went through the whole certification thing. Pretty much everybody that was there were all people that were competitive chefs and competitive cooks.
Okay.
And they were trying to figure out how the judging worked and figure out. And I've gone and done some of the judging for the official competitions and stuff like that. But I mean, Kansas City, they really don't know barbecue, but I'm still a registered judge for them. Not that I just started a fight with half the country or anything at all.
With one of my co-hosts who resides in Kansas City,
yeah,
but we'll get to that.
This interview's over, right?
No, it was really, it's been, and I laugh about this because the first time I ever was in Kansas City, and this would have been probably pushing 30 years ago, and we go to a Kansas City barbecue joint. I'm like, all right, if I got to go to Kansas City, I want to go do Kansas City barbecue. And we let one of the sales guys pick where we're going. Where did we wind up? The KC Masterpiece restaurant. I was just madder than hell the entire time. I'm like, couldn't we have gone and gotten real food? Not that it wasn't bad, but pretty much it was all swimming in store-bought sauce.
Yeah.
And so it was really fun and interesting learning about how the Barbecue Society came about, which was fundamentally bunch of good old boys like cooking and talking, and like certain things do, it grew and became a much bigger deal. And I've done judging and stuff in other regional competitions and things like that, and I've done some cooking in some of the competitions. And so it's just one of those things that to me is a lot of fun and a really fun argument to go have, and go try and figure out what people's local regional flavors, what is it they go with.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's more of a fun thing for me. But yeah, I definitely have sampled my way across the country.
Nice. Well, beyond obviously the touring and the meeting people, and sampling the different techniques that people do to cook barbecue at different portions of the country, is there anything else about competitions that keeps you out on the road? I mean, that's a lot of work. It's one thing to tour around and just eat good barbecue, but getting into the competition circuit, that can be a job in and of itself if you take it seriously. So there is a modicum of work involved. What is it that keeps you going with that?
I do not do that circuit right now.
right.
That is way too big a commitment. Between the fact that I do a lot of tech consulting and
Okay.
consulting for clients and stuff like that. I do a lot of book and conventions, sci-fi conventions, fantasy conventions, stuff like that. I do a fair number of tech and entrepreneurial conventions and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I do Scottish Highland Games and heavy athletics. And I spend a fair amount of time judging, throwing heavy stuff. I just came off of Grandfather Mountain for 10 days. So, going and judging barbecue is one of those things that's fun to do, but to get hard and heavy in the circuit, you're going to spend a lot of time on that to really get in there and do it.
Gotcha.
So it's one of those things that, you got to pick the things that make you money versus which ones cost you more.
Sure. Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. Well, then let's get to the goodness then, man. Let's talk about the food itself. All right. You're the pro, you're the seasoned expert. You tell me, what are the major categories of barbecue that people ought to know? And what is your favorite?
So the first thing, of course, is going to be ribs. Everybody knows ribs. You've got your St. Louis style, you've got the beef rib, you've got all the different categories of ribs and stuff like that you're going to get into. And I love some good pork ribs. I kind of like the St. Louis style cut, but I'm used to cutting my own.
Okay.
Which means you can cut it so you've got a bit more meat on the top of it. It cooks you can cook it slower. It doesn't dry out. You can keep a little bit of a layer of fat on it. You do want to peel the membrane off. I know, there's all the arguments. Do you peel the membrane or not? Do you peel the membrane or not on the ribs? Personally, yeah, I go peel the membrane because A, it lets the flavor through, and B, it's a whole lot less of a pain when you go to start cutting them.
Okay.
Then you start talking about pork barbecue. Now, if you're getting into pulled and chopped, just going in there, if you're even just doing good old style pig picking and getting into the meat, it's really the thing there is, are you going with a whole hog? Not to play the bad joke, but are you going with a whole hog, which is my personal preference? But you got to have a lot of people there ready to eat. And, and honestly, for a lot of the time for competitions, they don't do that unless you are doing a full pig cook-off. If you're doing something like Kansas City, or if you're doing most of the judging competitions, because you've got a limited amount of time, and cooking pork is all about time. In fact, most cooking is all about time. You're talking butts and shoulders, which, is readily available. It's easy to get. You can cook them all day long, and they cook relatively quick. Now personally, if I'm cooking one, I'm usually looking at least 8 to 12 hours on a nice slow cook on a shoulder or something like that. You can go a little bit faster, but if you really want to get something that has that nice pull to it.
Yeah.
And then, you start getting into, or if you're talking about the beef side of it, briskets and those kinds of things, and you get into the beef ribs as well. But for the most part, with most competitions, what you're getting is a mixture of that brisket. You're getting into that shoulder or butt, and usually you want to use a butt for competitions.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of that general St. Louis or shortcut type of ribs. And that's what you usually see at competitions, because you can cook them, you can cook consistently. They can cook in the amount of time you've got, and they're usually readily available. Now, the current issues we have with supply chain and stuff like that are starting to create some problems. The other thing with being able to get ribs and get shoulders and butts and things like that. The other thing you'll find sometimes is when they'll do a chicken cook as well.
Okay.
So if you're getting into, usually when you're doing that, you're working thighs, you're working some legs, you're working wings, where you can do those and cook those a different gradation in how much you want to go with the smoke. Now, the fun part everybody looks at are the smoke rings, or what are called smoke rings. Now, a lot of that, you can fake what that is if you come in with it frozen first.
Okay.
So you can actually play. So if you've got control of the meat, and usually when you're doing a cook, you have control of it. So you can play games like coming in, am I coming in with the whole thing is frozen or starting to thaw? Because you don't marinate it, you don't do anything else like that. All your seasoning, all of that's got to be done during an official competition.
Right.
So you can control creating some of those nice, pretty rings and layering things like that, just by coming in with it frozen. And because of how it cooks in layers and thaws, that also means a lot of the time by the time the outside crisps a little bit, when the inside starts to thaw, it also keeps it a lot juicier in the middle of that if you do it right.
Okay.
So there's a lot of tricks you see that are played with what's coming in and how people are cooking. And, what we usually would call smoke rings, where you're truly going through and smoking it, versus a lot of the time it's, if you're putting it onto cooking surfaces, we'll come back to that. But I mean, there's a lot of tricks you can play about what color you get in the meat, how done the meat looks, what, are you getting something that's more the pinkish? Are you getting something that's a little bit whiter? Or, are you even getting some of that little bit of a blue look to it, or that reddish tinge on the outside? Especially if you crisp something up on the outside, you want to create that nice bark on the outside of it. The hard part of it is this: no matter what, any of these competitions come down to who are the judges and what are their personal tastes. And so that's one of those things that when you were talking about the circuit, if you're out there on the circuit and, judges get to know cooks get to know judges, people get to know people's tastes, that makes a big difference than if you have somebody come in that's a wild card. Because again, you're playing to somebody's taste you don't necessarily know. And these are the things that all kind of feed into that competition side of things. Because if you're going to be out there and doing this on a regular basis, and you're getting to know at least the people regionally around you, and you're getting to work that side on the circuit, it's all about learning what people's tastes are. And sometimes when you're preparing, so the final part of the judge is this: you actually prepare a little gridded plate, basically, that's got your samples on it. And, if you've got somebody who loves that the overcooked bark on the outside of it, or things like that, you want to make sure you've got that on there. But one of the hardest parts about doing the pork barbecue, the pulled barbecue piece or the chopped piece, is by getting the right mixture of having some bark out there for the people that like that and want to sample that, having the nice pulled inner stuff that is that nice, soft, warm, tender meat on the inside, but not having the wrong mixture of, or depending on how you cut and mix that. So if somebody wants their bark, they're going to go to the bark first. If somebody wants the inner stuff, but whatever you're putting out there, if you're putting too many flavors, then you can run into a problem of, I really like the bark, but they also put a lot of the other pulled on there. So I ate the pulled.
Gotcha.
It worked for me. It didn't work for me. So there's a whole lot of different things that go into it, because at the end of the day, a bad cook is just a bad cook. Maybe it was a bad piece of meat, maybe temperatures didn't, weather, all sorts of things come into play. But if everybody's cooking about on par, then you're playing to people's preferences and tastes, and you really are just having to hit that game.
Gotcha. You mentioned brisket a second ago. That, for my money, is the Cadillac of barbecue, and I do not step up to that plate lightly. What is the trick to making a good, solid beef brisket to you? What makes
Number
for a
one,
good brisket?
You got to start with a good cut.
Okay.
No, I mean, no matter what, you got to start with a good cut. If you don't have a good cut, you can still do things to cook it and everything else and come out with a good piece. But if you don't have a good cut, it will make a huge difference. And I mean, if you can get the whole brisket flank, you're in much better shape than you just wound up with a tip or something like that you're trying to cook. So I mean, you really want to make sure you've got that choice of the brisket and doing the whole flank.
Okay.
The second thing is you want to have a high, for me, and again, I'm speaking for me, I like to crank up that high temp, 700 degrees, put it in there for a quick sear on the outside, and then drop it down for a slow cook, because
Okay.
that way you seal everything in. That's the thing I like, because that also gives you, again, that nice crispy outer edge. That's kind of like the bark that you get on pork barbecue. But what it does is like anything else with a steak. If you get that good sear outside, it traps everything in, and then it can cook nice, slow, and you can cook it to exactly whatever level of done you want it.
Awesome. Any seasoning tips for a brisket?
Now I will tell you, I use Celtic sea salt.
Okay.
I love Celtic sea salt. I've also used the pink Himalayan salt. Minerals, it's one of those things, the mineral content of the salt can have a big effect. Fresh pepper, when you're doing the pepper side of it, fresh crushed black pepper, stuff like that. Now I've got a couple of different seasoning mixes that I do for my own personal taste. I love garlic.
Sir.
Yep, I love garlic, and if it's something I'm cooking for me, I'll actually take fresh garlic slices and stick them throughout the entire brisket.
Okay.
So that they're olive coated when you stick them in, they sear in there, and it just sort of soaks throughout. For competition, that's really probably not going to work, because you're going to have again, you're playing to people's tastes. But if it's for me, you get the slivers of garlic in there that are stuffed in there. And I've got a couple of seasoning mixes that I've created that are usually pretty heavy on the herbs, and you usually have a little bit of, a ghost pepper thrown in the back of them or something like that to give it a light dust. So you get that nice little bite now and then. And one of the things that I like to do, and again, this is when I'm cooking for me, not for competition sort of thing. When I'm cooking for me, I'm also looking to put a drip tray beneath it, because I will actually gather all the jus coming off of it. And one of the things I'll do a lot of the time is I'll baste it in Guinness.
Okay. Good call.
And so that gives it a little bit of that flowery flavor to it, and gives you a little bit of that stout flavor to it. And you can make a nice drizzle out of the drippings and out of the Guinness as it rolls off of that works really nicely and really well.
Oh, yes. I can see this episode being one I go back and play many, many, many times over so I can take notes. Well, we can't. Kev, you got something to add?
Yeah, that drizzle added to your baked beans that you're cooking in the pan right there on the grill.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've done that with pork barbecue, where I'll take some of the drizzle out and add that to the beans with some extra bacon.
Well, and when with pork barbecue, I will drizzle that all day long with a mixture of beer and vinegar, apple cider vinegar, organic or apple cider vinegar,
right,
and let that drizzle into the pan all day long. Let that smoke. Then I will take a bunch of that off with, and I'll make a warm tomato-based sauce that is beer, garlic, and you can tune the heat to it just off of those drippings. I've got a friend of who his wife will just drink it with a straw.
Well, you touched upon pork barbecue a number of times so far, and with you being a Carolina guy, obviously we've got to talk about that. First things first, where do you stand on Carolina barbecue? I know that's the whole vinegar-based thing is a very divisive issue to some people. I happen to fall on the light side of the argument. I like it. My wife turned me on to that a number of years ago when I moved to North Carolina, and I've been a fan ever since. Do you do the vinegar thing, or where do you think that the vinegar has a place in all this?
First thing I'm going to say is I love my vinegar. Now,
Okay.
When we talk about Carolina barbecue, that makes it sound like there's one barbecue throughout the Carolinas. I am from low country, South Carolina.
Okay.
The particular area I'm from, not only do we have barbecue, we also have barbecue hash, which is everything left over but the squeal.
Okay.
And there are two flavors of hash. There's red hash, which is what I grew up on. Loved the stuff to death. Then there is Well, there's also a yellow hash. Occasionally you'll find this white hash because they just didn't even mustard it enough. But there's a yellow hash that's a mustard base. And that's what you kind of find on this particular line. I grew up on the southern side of that line. The northern side of the line, where I went to school in South Carolina at the Gamecocks, that's kind of working into that mustard base.
Okay.
And then but I mean, where I grew up, it was black pepper vinegar that has a hint of tomato to it, just
Okay.
a hint. It's got a little bit of the red color. It's got some, and it's black pepper vinegar, and so you get that vinegary heat.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of vinegar.
Okay. Yeah.
Now,
Same.
So, but part of that's just because where I grew up. Now, just north of that is when you get into a lot of the mustard based sort of stuff, and so you get the tangy mustard, and then you get the sweet mustard going past you, going that direction. I can do the mustard, not necessarily my top preference. Now, the thing about barbecue that pains me the absolute most, and I will never ever forgive, not this is anywhere I go anyway, but the McRib. What pains me the most is that the McRib was inspired by somebody having barbecue down in Charleston. Just the fact that they try to equate the two makes me want to burn down every McDonald's coast to coast as a public service announcement. But yeah,
Carolina barbecue sandwich, lots of sauce or a little bit of sauce?
I will usually go a fair amount of sauce.
Okay.
But in fact, so since I'm in Charlotte, there's a particular place I like to go that has both the black pepper vinegar, but they've also got a vinegary sweet. That's a tomato vinegary sweet. So I'll put a little bit of the vinegary sweet on there, and then I will put a fair amount of just the black pepper vinegar on there, and I'll go with both.
Okay. For those at home who are not familiar with exactly what we're talking about, and Jim, you can correct me on this if you want, but Carolina barbecue sandwich is big, good quality roll piled high with pulled or chopped barbecue, preferably pulled. Then you hit it with a good bit of vinegar sauce. You top it with coleslaw, top bun, and you're away and running with your sandwich. Jim, am I
And a
on
lot of
point
time
there?
you're going to get a dill pickle thrown in there on the side, either on the side or on top, a couple of chips on top.
Used to love getting those at the Durham Bulls games. Nothing like sitting out at the ball field on a nice, cool spring Carolina morning with a Carolina barbecue sandwich in one hand and an ice cold beer in the other, and it being 72 degrees out and hearing the crack of a bat. That is a good freaking day.
And you were lollygagging.
And I was lollygagging. I was absolutely lollygagging.
You were lollygagging. I cannot believe you'd be slacking off like that.
Good days indeed. Well, now one last question on the Carolina front while we're kind of on that. I always heard a term thrown around when I was in the Triangle, well, not always, but on a couple of occasions, called Lexington barbecue sauce. And that was kind of its own thing. You familiar with that? If so, what is that? Okay.
So I'm going to make it difficult because
Okay.
there's actually two Lexingtons.
Okay.
But Lexington barbecue sauce usually there's Lexington, South Carolina, which is near where I grew up. And what you find throughout a lot of the Carolinas are variations of Maurice's and Piggy Park. And there was a set of brothers that all stole the same family recipe and came out with a variety of different places. And so they've kind of created a degree of what you would consider like that Lexington, South Carolina kind of barbecue.
Okay.
Then there's a variation of what you find going towards the Triangle side of things. And they do a lot of Beaufort stew usually when you're finding this, but that Lexington up there is kind of very similar. But when I've had it, it's a little more vinegary on that side. But that side of Lexington, what you get up there towards the Triangle of that flavor of Lexington barbecue. I've had what they call Lexington barbecue, which was both the mustardy kind of side, and I've also had it where I'm not sure what they did with it, but it involved a ketchup bottle.
Gotcha.
And it was an abomination. But a lot of the time, what I find with what I've gotten going towards the Triangle, again, they do something kind of similar to that I grew up on, which is a vinegar pepper base, a little bit more of the tomato sauce to it. So it's still got a fair amount of that tomatoey to it. And that a lot of the time is the flavor of quote unquote Lexington barbecue on that side of the Carolinas that I tend to like to get.
Gotcha. There was a product, and I'll throw out a quick free plug here. There was a product out of Nashville, North Carolina called George's that you can get regionally there in a lot of supermarkets. And then if you go to little moms and pops general stores and stuff out in the sticks, they'll have it. And that was always a good happy medium for me. It had plenty of vinegar, plenty of pepper bite to it, but it still had that just splash of red to give it a little bit of color, but not so much that it was very syrupy. It still had that real runny vinegar kind of texture to it.
Yep.
But all right, man. Well, listen, I do kind of want to wind down the barbecue talk, because I do want to talk with you a bit about virtual cons and your work with Con-Tinual, because that's really cool. But before we get off of this topic, I do want to put forth to you, you're obviously a pro at this. You obviously know this stuff. So when you, Jim Nettles, walk into a restaurant and someone has said to you, you got to go eat at this place, they got good barbecue. You walk in, you sit down, you pull out your chair, waiter walks over and asks you to take your order. What are you going to order? What is the signature dish that every barbecue restaurant should be measured by, in your opinion?
Pulled pork.
Okay.
I mean, because again, I love my ribs, but generally if I'm going to go grate it. And again, this is that personal taste thing, but I'm going with the pulled pork. Just because that will tell you how they cook, every bit of it. Now, if I can get a bit of pulled pork and some ribs thrown on the side, then yeah, we're all good and I'm happy. But yeah, if I'm going to go for the judging, it's going to be the pulled pork.
Awesome. Yep. I am totally the same. Well, let's shift gears onto the virtual con front, shall we? You are, as mentioned at the top of the show, very much an author for advocates, and not just very much an author writer advocate, and not just, hey, here's some tools on the craft of writing. Here are things to make you a better writer. You really embrace the whole authorpreneur, to borrow a Joanna Penn term. This whole notion that authors have to be out and have to be hustlers. You've got a book out that, obviously folks can go check out called Business Essentials for Writers. Rumor has it there's another one of those in the pipeline. You've also got a workshop that you teach to be able to help writers learn a lot of this stuff. And then you also have a lot of author education in your content, your actual content for this virtual con that you started. And it's kind of there that I want to pick up this discussion. Pandemic hits. Obviously, we're all stuck at home. We're climbing the walls. We're looking for stuff to do, and we're looking for ways to connect with people. And one of the first things that pops out is this whole idea of virtual cons, mostly taking place by Zoom. You were very much at the forefront of that. You, Gail Z. Martin, John Hartness, a number of other people from the Charlotte area. It was interesting in that it started out as, just a place for people to basically come hang out. And then you started integrating in panels. And now you've got a full-blown scene whereby you can go in, and depending on what you're there for, there are full-blown tracks. So if it's author education you want, there's a video track for that. If it's fan discussion, there's a track for that. So it's very, very dynamic now with what it is. But let's start from the beginning, man. How did you guys come up with this from the start? Whose idea was it? And what were the first steps? What was the genesis of Con-Tinual?
So I'm actually going to go back to about 2018.
Okay.
So again, my main life is in technology. Now, I've been a writer for a very long time. I do a lot of fiction. I do a lot of nonfiction, all that kind of good stuff. But I had started Author Essentials, which is primarily is a workshop at an education company. And I've done podcasts and stuff off and on over the years. And we were doing a bunch of conventions. And I mean, so John Hartness, Gail Z. Martin, we've got kind of the Charlotte Mafia, as they so lovingly refer to it.
Right.
We do a lot of stuff together. And I had been doing a fair number of, I'd done a fair number of like cyber conventions for technology. I'd done a couple of cyber conventions for books that were like a once a year sort of thing, and had been involved in a couple of those. And I was kind of ramping up the media network just for the education side of things, workshops, podcasts, all that kind of thing. And I'd been talking to John and Gail about it for a while, and had been mentioning, I'm like, why don't we do something virtually so that we can stretch out beyond just what we normally do regionally, or be able to pull in people we see once a year at like a Dragon Con or something, and do something bigger. It was like, well, nobody's going to do anything virtually. Nobody's going to care about the virtual stuff.
Right.
And I mean, so I was mainly focused on it from a podcast perspective, but I'm like, if I'm doing audio, I'm gonna do video too,
right,
to hit all the channels. And I was already building some of that infrastructure for my stuff. And then the lockdown happened. Well, right at the end of February, beginning of March of 2000, I probably had COVID, and I had a fairly moderate case of it, but I don't really remember about 3 weeks. I was still working and everything, but I don't really remember that 3 weeks. And I'd had a string of conventions in there and everything else as well. And they were just starting to talk about lockdown now. And as a big part of my normal life, I deal with a lot of business continuity, disaster recovery, stuff like this. I've dealt with pandemic planning for a very long time. This was just not the pandemic we were promised. We were waiting on bird flu. Well, Gail was down in Florida on vacation, and they were locking everything down while she was down there. And she sends a text to John and me one morning and says, okay, I did a thing. What do we do next? Well, I did a thing was she had gone and gotten the Con-Tinual logo. She'd come up with Con-Tinual, gotten a logo. Where do we go next? Well, we jumped on a Zoom call, BS for about 10 minutes. All right, well, let's go do the stuff we usually do. And we planned out 2 shows. We planned out the panel room, which is a panel room topic show like you'd find at any convention. And we talked about doing Hot Off the Press, which is a new releases show. And because we were talking at the time, expecting, as everybody's like, oh, we're locking things down for 2 weeks. I'm like, this is not 2 weeks. It's what I do. I'm looking at this going, there's no way that this is just a couple of weeks. And we were starting to watch conventions cancel. And so it's like, all right, well, let's give this a shot. And being the fact of the number of people we know that are nothing but full-time authors who are all of a sudden seeing literally a large chunk of their livelihood dry up, it was, all right, well, let's go give this a shot. Let's go build a playground and see who wants to come play. And so 3 weeks later, we dropped our first 2 shows, and that was towards the end of April 2000. When we hit April of 2000 or 2002, 2 years this year, we were pushing 600 shows.
Wow. That's incredible.
And, we've been, and it's all friends putting it together, making it work. We produce on average 5 or 6 shows a week, sometimes a little bit more. Right now. So I usually produce the panel room, Hot Off the Press. We've got a track called the Comics Layer, and Nancy Northcott runs the Comics Layer. And that's of course all about comics and that sort of stuff. And then we've got Gail has her Supernatural fandom track because she's very heavy into the Supernatural TV show. That would be an understatement, by the way.
A little bit, just a wee bit. Yeah,
it's an addiction. I mean, we can call it what it is. It's an addiction. We've got another fandom track, which is a little bit more generic. Like we just did a couple of shows, or we've done shows about things like Tolkien. We've done shows around things like we just did one on B5. We've done Star Wars. We've done Star Trek. We just recorded one this week on basically around Wheel of Time and Robert Jordan and that fandom. So that fandom track is much more about let's come and geek out about the stuff we love and everything we do. We've got one that's called An Hour With, which is pretty much one-on-one interviews with people that have been in the business forever and award winners and things like that. And we've been very fortunate in the people that have come and hung out and played with us for that. We do a lot of like special programming, hey, holidays are coming. So from pretty much about the end of September until, into mid-January is a major holiday stretch. And we're doing a bunch of holiday shows. We do some live stuff like bar cons and things like that. And we also have had the fortune to work with a number of conventions and either help take them virtual or support their virtual activities and stuff like that. For example, Daytona Beach, and I just went blank. But we worked with about 8-9 conventions, including a little bit of stuff, with Dragon and Dragon Con and some of their stuff as well, where we did a couple of joint things there. And so it sort of just took on life of its own. Everything is done realistically with, our production crew, such as it is Gail, myself, Jean Marie Ward, Nancy Northcott, Jeannie Adams, uh, Lisa Macon Wood, or El Marie Wood. And Jason Tonger's on sometimes as a moderator. We've got a couple of other people in the background as well, but really it's half a dozen people that produce and make all the fun stuff happen.
That we are small, but we are mighty. I did want to add, when you were talking about the various tracks and stuff that you guys have and programs that you have through Con-Tinual, one of my favorites that I really enjoy is Gail's Thrifty Author stretch that she does. You know, for those of us authors who are balling on a budget, as we like to say, and let's face it, that's most of us. That's great information, and it's short, it's quick. She gets in, she gives you the meat and potatoes right out of the gate of what you need to know, and then you're out. So, you know, for those of us who have day jobs and other responsibilities as podcasters and whatnot, that stuff's priceless to be able to get gold like that in that real tight, concise format. So thanks to Gail. And we make fun of her for her supernatural addiction out of love. And I know because I've been on several of those panels with her because I'm a fan.
Well, and so talking about Thrifty Author, that actually started out of our Charlotte meetup group that Gail started and runs. And we've got, you know, and that's kind of where Thrifty Author came out of, was Thrifty Author Network. It was our writers group, and we would have a monthly sit down, talk business, talk industry, talk whatever we needed to, and hammer it out. And so Gail has given that a good run. Right now, Thrifty Author is going to be on a little bit of a hiatus. I'm getting ready to start doing, I'm going to be restarting one of my old shows and doing that as kind of a replacement for that, talking more about the business side of stuff, what's happening, some more topical stuff. Looking to start that probably the first or second week of August after I get past these next couple of conventions.
Cool. Well, you know, we've talked a lot about kind of how Con-Tinual came to be, what it is now, but let's look forward into the future. You know, we are 3 years now into all of this stuff, give or take. Technology has evolved a lot. You know, one of the things that comes to mind for me is how Zoom has changed. You know, Zoom now has a feature, depending on, you know, what package level you subscribe to, where you can literally have a full blown convention within Zoom, whereby you have your, you know, your major, we'll call it the, you know, the grand ballroom event that's going on. And then you have breakout rooms where other panels can be happening in real time. And fan attendees can just pop in and out of any one of those rooms, video, sound, whole deal, anytime they want, just like walking in and out of different panel rooms at a convention. And you buy your ticket and away you go. I think most would agree that the virtual element is not going anywhere, that it is going to be some sort of a hybrid approach that a lot of conventions will embrace now. You know, where do you see Con-Tinual fitting into all of that? You touched on, you know, that you've already been in talks and worked with other cons to kind of integrate a virtual element to their programming. But, you know, how do you see that shaking out long-term for you guys?
Well, there's a couple things that are in the works that we're trying to expand on. One of the things that we're going to be starting relatively soon, probably after we all survive Dragon Con, is we're starting a newsletter service that goes out and promotes a lot of the same kind of stuff we're promoting right now. We've talked about doing some more you know, live events, live recordings where you can watch the live broadcast type of thing, trying to do more bar cons, more live events. And one of the things we're also doing is we're doing Continual live from some of the conventions we're at, so that for everybody that's used to, you know, coming, they can come hang out and see a live recording of us being, well, jackasses. Sorry, we can be the professionals that we are. And then me, but we're doing more of that. One of the things that I'm focused on right now is that trying to expand how many channels we're on. One of the other things that we're working on doing is more sound bite size. Because I mean, we do generally, most of our shows are about an hour. You know, is to start pulling more and more of the sound bites. And the biggest challenge we have, of course, is this is all volunteer. There's, you know, we're all footing the bill for all of this, and time. Still books to be written, all that kind of stuff. But we're starting to chop some of that up, trying to add some more channels to get to it and be able to get through it. Because right now we broadcast primarily on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And I want to add some additional channels to that. Some of the tools and things like that I've got that we use give us additional options. in fact, one of the things that one of the platforms that I've got in the background where I'm expanding the workshops company is going to give us some more capabilities. One of the other things that I do want to start incorporating as we move forward is going to be live workshops, which is going to be blended between Con-Tinual and the AE Workshops company, where we're going to try to do some more live stuff. And much like you get at a convention, where you can do slush readings, we're going to be doing workshops around things. I mean, right now it's kind of an interesting mix, but the virtual side of things is never going to go away. I can't tell you the number of people when live conventions that came back were afraid that we were going to be done, both from guests coming on as well as from people that are actually out there and watching, because there's a lot of people that still don't feel safe and secure going to a large event. There's a lot of people that physically can't necessarily do it. And one of the big benefits of doing the things that we do virtually, we can put people on a panel that would never, ever be on a panel together otherwise.
Yep.
We've brought people in from Europe. We've brought people in from Australia and New Zealand. We've had people on from Germany. We've had starts and fits of trying to do an entire European sideshow with nothing but, guests out of Europe and things along those lines. So the options that this gives us, both for bringing people together and the things that we do, as well as, just the fact of the number of people we can reach. And I mean, at the end of the day, one of the biggest benefits is this. This weekend I'll be in Winston-Salem at Congregate. We'll be teaching some workshops and things like there as a part of Congregate. Well, if I'm on a panel, we do a workshop there, we do something along those lines, it's over and done. For the things that we do, that we record, we broadcast, they're out there in perpetuity, or at least until the EMP, at which point I don't think any of us will care anyway. But I will be useful in the future as being able to cook barbecue. But one of the big benefits is this information is out there. And one of the things I'm really kind of happy about we've been able to do with Con-Tinual is how we've been able to really curate the guests and curate the panels. We've really not had a lot of problems. We've really not had a lot of things where you're looking at, really, is that what you really wanted to say? And I mean, we're coming up on having had 500 people. Some of those people are, dead on if they release a book or a New York Times bestseller. Some of those people just released their first book. And you might have both of those people on the same panel. So if I'm a first-time author and I'm trying to get past and, nervousness of being and presenting and talking and all these other things, and you happen to then be on a panel with somebody like Todd McCaffrey,
right,
and you're talking about dragons, okay, how often is that sort of thing going to happen for somebody that's a first-time author?
Sure.
So I mean, we created a playground, and we've been really happy at the way it's continued to grow. We're continuing to nurture it, nudge it forward, and trying to do some new stuff. And like I say, our biggest challenge really becomes that bandwidth thing of, how many hours are there in a day?
People who love to watch podcasts and video productions and consume all of this content, I think the vast majority of them have absolutely no clue how much work it takes to produce that little 1 hour thing or that 30-minute thing. I mean, we're talking hours of production time, editing audio, mixing tracks, balancing levels, dropping in sound clips. It takes time in order to get that kind of perfect recipe. But that was pretty well kind of the last of my questions. I know Rob has been chomping at the bit to say something since the crack on Kansas City to start the interview. So props to Rob for being able to keep his lid on for the last half hour. Good on you, sir. I will give you first crack at our guest to see if there is anything I missed or should have asked that I didn't.
Well, yeah, that's certainly not going to get forgotten. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll bring moonshine for the in-person.
All right, that's fair. So I do live in Kansas City, and I do have a personal favorite of you talked about styles earlier. burnt ends is where barbecue begins and ends with me, to be honest. So how much time have you spent in Kansas City then? And where's a hole in the wall place that maybe I don't know?
Good question, because I have not actually been in Kansas City in about 15 years.
It has changed here.
Yeah, and I know it's changed a whole lot. I spent a few months in Kansas City, but it would have been, most of that would have been about 30 years ago.
That's fair. Joe's KC, the guy who runs Oklahoma Joe's, which is now Joe's KC, has also opened several barbecue store restaurants, and he's really been pushing, training people on that, providing sauces from across the states and everything like that. He's done a lot of stuff to try and promote more people doing it and that sort of thing. And there's been a lot of others. So yeah, it's definitely changed even in the last, I mean, I've lived in Kansas City now for 12 years, and I've definitely seen it change dramatically in just that time. So
yeah, I've heard a fair amount about how much it has changed since the last time I was there. I've been out and done a couple of projects that in and out of Kansas City over the years, and I'd like to come back. I mean, as much as grief as I'm given, I mean, it really goes back to, I will just never forget that first time. And it's like,
you actually got a lot of bonus points for me when you said that the reason, like you hinted at that with Casey Masterpiece. Like I don't even, I pushed away. I wish you hadn't even mentioned it, honestly, because Jack Stack and their burnt ends, Joe's KC and their ribs, Miller's has really good pulled pork. It can go down the line, but Casey Masterpiece isn't anywhere on the list.
But they will happily sell you a bottle of sauce for $5.99.
Yeah, but the thing of it is sauce doesn't make barbecue for me. To me, it's all about, if they can cook the meat well, then you can always find a sauce to your taste. But cooking meat is harder than sauce in my mind.
Well, I think Jim nailed that earlier when he talked about time and temperature. You particularly with pulled pork, that's a day. I mean, I know when I'm going to smoke pork here at my house, that's going to be my day. I'm going to be up. I'm going to have the meat out at probably 4 to 5 a.m. so it can sit out on the counter and rest for a while. Then it's going to go on to the smoke, and depending on how big the shoulder is, it's going to be, from 8 to 12 hours. That's the day. And make sure there's plenty of beer, because you're going to need it.
And one thing I did want to add, one of the seasonings that I've been playing with a lot of late, because it really seems to go great with both beef and pork, is coffee. I've been putting coffee in a bunch of my rubs, and it's come out fantastic. You can pepper it to taste, and you can add whatever salt. And I'm with you on the garlic thing. I am vampire free now, 54 years, and there's a reason for that.
Yep. Kev, how about you, man? Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. Did you have something?
Now I was going to say, so what kind of cooker are you guys using? So I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, in the yard down there right now, I do have a propane chest smoker, but it gets used mostly for events, because that way I can put stuff in it to cook and be out on the field all day long. But mainly here at the house, I've got a green egg, and I got a Traeger pellet smoker, and I got a wood chest smoker.
Man, I hear great things about the Traeger and the Pit Bosses, and I have not taken that plunge, but it is very, very much on my radar. I'm Poe redneck smoker. I got an electric master built that allows me to monitor the temp, set everything up. I keep the smoke rolling with the chips in the side loader, and out I go. But it's consistent and it's solid, and it treats me well, whether I do pulled pork, whether I do chickens, whether I do ribs. I mean, I've made a lot of good meals and not gotten a whole lot of complaints for what comes out of that. So I keep it simple with the electric. So Kev, I did want to throw to you, man. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Well, when I was younger, I was a charcoal guy, charcoal only, and that's it. You know what I mean? But I just don't have the time like that anymore. So I'm like you. I've got a master built electric smoker now, and I love the dang thing.
Yeah.
But I do take my time with it. If I'm doing a rack of ribs, it's going to take 5 hours.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to do it slow.
Yep. That does remind me of a question I had.
5 hours is slow. That hurting my soul.
When I got a house full, I got a big family, and they're ready to eat when they're ready to eat. So you can't just,
So my question, you mentioned earlier that you started at 600 or 700 degrees and give it the sear, which I love that. I do that with steaks all the time, and then pop it back down to think you said 250 or something like that,
Yeah,
200.
around 250, 275.
So how long do you keep it at the 600 or 700?
So usually when I'm doing that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it on the egg. I'm gonna crank the egg way up,
Okay.
and I'm gonna throw it there, and I'm gonna sear it for maybe at most 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes on each side.
Okay. And then you're going to
Um,
shift it over to a different.
And then I'm gonna either. Well, sometimes I'll just crash the temperature, because you can crash the temp in an egg
Okay.
pretty quick. But a lot of the time, what I'll do is then I'll take it, move it over the Traeger, and let it go, because I mean that's pellets going all day long. That's nothing
Sure.
but smoke. It's nothing but a nice slow heat on it all day long. I don't have to mess with it so damn much, other than making sure that there's still pellets running through periodically. And it depends on how big of the cut is. And if I've got a full, let's say I got a full brisket, you're talking at least 6 hours, at least 6 hours. And I mean, I'm usually going to go to about 8 or 9, because if you've done that kind of a sear, you've still got enough temp that's going to carry and be cooking that for a while anyway.
Okay.
Now if I've cheated and I've gone through and I froze it first, because a lot of the time if I'm gonna do that and I'm just cooking, what I'll do is I will actually freeze it in a brine, or freeze it in a marinade. And that way you can just let it sit like that for a couple weeks.
Right.
And you get this nice flavor throughout it. And then you when you do that, what you pretty much wind up having to do is slow smoke it until at least the outside has defrosted. And then that's when you do that sear on there. And a lot of
Okay.
times if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do it on cast iron. I'm
Okay.
gonna crank the cast iron and sear the outside physically that way, because it's still frozen. Instead of trying to do it just with a flame sear.
Okay. Makes sense.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has been an absolute treat to have our good friend Jim Nettles on the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, talking barbecue, talking conventions. Definitely go check out Con-Tinual on social media. They have a Facebook group that is extremely active. You can catch all their content in there. As he said, they're also on YouTube and Twitch, so you can find them there as well. But definitely get out there and get active. And Jim, before I let you go, man, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you just how much we, the authors, appreciated that a couple of years ago and still do today. When we had no way to get the word out about our books other than just, hey, here's a Facebook post that 5% of my followers are actually going to see. That gave us an avenue and a way to connect with fans that we did not have for well over a year and a half. And that was all because of the hard work of crews like you and your staff. So on behalf of all authors listening to this show, thank you for that. Real quick, anything I missed? Where can people find you on the web? Any other places they can find you on social media? Now's the time to pub yourself before we let you go.
Well, the easiest way to find me is jamespnettles.com. I'm rebuilding the site because I'm moving to the new platform. If you're interested in any of the books and workshops, that side of things, you can go to authoressentials.net or authoressentialsworkshops.com. We're having fun of moving all the different platforms over to an entirely new platform, so they're moving slowly but slowly. And then if you are interested, I'm also the business dean for the Speculative Fiction Academy. So I run a lot of the business track and content over there, and a lot of my classes and workshops are there as well. And that's the speculativefictionacademy.com. If you're interested in Con-Tinual, want to come hang out, you can go to continualconvention.com. You can get from there to all the different links. And like I say, I'm moving that platform as well. And then, pretty much it looks like I'm more active on social media than I am, but I'm in and out. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, the hive of scum and villainy that it is.
Yeah.
And, I've got a TikTok account, as much as it pains the inner data security person that's within me. But, there's stuff we're working on there for that platform. IG, sort of all over the place. And coming up, like I say, I'll be in Winston-Salem this weekend, doing some panels, doing some workshops. The next weekend I'll be in Raleigh for Galaxy SuperCon, and we'll be selling a ton of books. I think I'm going to be at Authors and Dragons Con, which will be here in Charlotte in August. And I think I'm just going to be mostly hanging out and probably doing some video. Then I will be at Dragon Con, where I am already getting stacked up, where I'll be split between the Electronic Frontiers forum track and all the different writer tracks. And we may have some continual type surprises going on there as well. October, I will be at Multiverse Convention in Atlanta again, which will be my third trip to Atlanta this year, which goes against my inner peace, and a few other things. So I'm out. I'm causing trouble.
You are a
Come by
busy
and say
man,
hi.
sir. Busy man indeed. Well, folks, if you're in Congregate coming up this weekend, definitely go find Jim. If you're going to be in Dragon Con coming up September, definitely find him there as well again, and all over social media and the web. Jim Nettles, thanks for coming on the show, man. It was an absolute treat.
Appreciate it, guys. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. We'll do it again soon. Catch you later, man.
Later.
All right, that's
Apple
gonna. There you go. That's going to bring us down to halftime while Jim lets himself out there. And halftime is where we talk about our presenting sponsor. That would, of course, be the fine folks over at ChrisKennedyPublishing.com. Check them out, ChrisKennedyPublishing.com. They got new books. They got new releases. It's military sci-fi. It's mechs. It's mages. It's Argonauts. It's agents. It's you name it. They got it all over there. Check them out, ChrisKennedyPublishing.com. They also have new releases every week, many times over. Rob, talk to me about this week's new release.
This week's new release is Fire and Bone by James Tarr. This is the second in the Echoes of Pangea book series. After decades of civil war, La Fuerza is on the run in Mexico, the communist guerrilla army seemingly on its last legs. Sergeant Seamus O'Malley was a big reason for their current ill fortune, and the veteran private contractor now has a huge price on his head. He's given an easy executive protection job in remote Cancun, but he isn't happy about his new babysitting assignment. The war rages on, sparking the worst wildfires the country has ever seen. The descendants of the genetically engineered animals once filling Pangea, the former dinosaur park, are forced by the fires to flee throughout Mexico, causing chaos. In the midst of this, La Fuerza struggles for victory, for its very existence, and its brutal soldiers are willing to do whatever it takes to get a win. A mercenary with a bounty on his head and the billionaire's daughter he protects seem like easy targets. Past the oblivious tourists and bright lights, Cancun is an island of civilization surrounded by jungle and death. It's holding its breath, waiting for the worst to happen. There's trouble in paradise, and Seamus O'Malley couldn't be happier.
That sounds awesome. All right, other stuff happening around CKP this week. New in audio would be Tango 22 by P.A. Pyatt. Much apologies to Mr. Pyatt, who I have up to now called Piot, because that's what my phone calls you on Facebook, good sir. Blame it on Tim Cook, not me. But anyway, it's P.A. Piot. He's a good dude too. Go follow him on social media. What is this? The sixth book in his Abner Fortis ISMC series, which absolutely rocks. Again, that's called Tango 22, out now in audio. So for folks hanging out on Audible, iTunes, and the works, make sure you go check that out. In other news from CKP, things just keep on rolling over at the CKP YouTube channel, man. Producer Jeremy and the gang, lots of content happening weekly for y'all, whether it's live podcasts with people like Kevin Eikenberry or Mike Jack Stumbos, among others, which they were just on here. I believe it was this week. They have new release launch parties like they just had with Mark Stallings for The Forgotten King, author interviews galore. I mean, there's just lots of stuff happening. And again, a lot of it's live. So get in there, man, hop into the chat boxes, ask questions to your favorite authors. They will interact with you, and away they go, because that's how they roll over there at the CKP YouTube page. So
and they just for those people who are there and are live and are asking questions, there are usually prizes given out to the best questions being asked. So if you want signed books or if you want some really cool merchandise, pop on up and ask some questions. They'll get you hooked up.
Absolutely. Again, that is the Chris Kennedy Publishing YouTube channel. They are large and in charge, so make sure you go check them out.
And now the news.
All right. So as noted in our last episode, we're doing things with video now. That requires us to do a few things differently, kind of reorganize the show a little bit. In this instance, we really wanted to get to Jim because we knew he was going to have a fantastic segment talking about barbecue and cons. So we bumped the news segment back after halftime so we could kind of brief you guys on what's been happening with us. Kevin, I'll start with you, man. What's happening in the world of Steverson?
Just got back from Tupelo Con. That was a great little con, wrestling going on there too and everything. So it was a good time. I was surprised. Now, that's the first time I've been to just a pop culture convention, not necessarily set up for artists, for science fiction, that kind of thing. A little bit of everything was there. And it was a good time. A lot of cosplay.
Cool. We saw a lot of
So,
that at Infinity Con back in
Yeah.
June. Nick and I. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But I'm back, and now took a look at the old calendar for Georgia, and there's a couple 1-days. I am going to November 5th hit Rome, Georgia, on the west side of the state for a 1-day pop culture convention. Turn right around and travel that evening, get a hotel room, because in Augusta on Sunday is one, and I will cross the entire state to hit both of those.
Nice.
So
You're a road warrior, sir.
Well, I mean,
Georgia Bulldog road warrior.
it's only 3.5, 4 hours. I mean, when I used to be a tour manager, we'd look at a show and go, "Hey, that's only 10 hours away."
Right.
And remember, in
Eastbound
Georgia,
down,
it's always just a
no
left
more
turn
Georgia.
down Peachtree.
That's it.
Rob, how about you, man? What's happening? I know you're on the road this weekend. Or this week. What's going on with you?
Well, my big thing this week was to get not the August release, which is already done for Eldritch Legacy. That's Embers and Ash by Marie Whitaker, and it's a really good story. Really excited about that one because it'll be the 5th of the 5 founders, and we'll be able to do some stuff that we've been wanting to do all along to get sort of all the world built, because all the continents will be there. So that's exciting. That comes out on August 16th. But this week I finished working on Kendra Merritt's The Pain Bearer, and I was blown away. Todd Fonestock recently won an award for one of the best stories in Colorado. Well, also winning at that same particular award ceremony was Kendra. And I'd never worked with her before. And let me tell you, this is some good stuff. You're going to love Rowan, her main character. You're going to love the story and the way she's run through this with some neat uses of magic and the way she has it structured. And it's a great story. I'm really excited about that one. That one's coming out in September. And of course, we've got a bunch of other stuff going on in Eldritch Legacy. Over the next couple of weeks, though, as I'm off on the road to Penzic and to other events, I'll be also working on the next Responsibility novel from Scott Huggins. I got another thing coming out from Chris Nuttall down the road in September. So a whole bunch of stuff's fall's going to be really hopping for New Mythology Press, because a bunch of stuff that I've been working on for a year and a half are finally coming to fruition, and can't tell you how excited I am.
Cool, man. Well, things continue with The Last Argonaut. Edits continue on that. I don't mind saying, guys, it's the hardest book I've ever had to write. Like there are challenges, and then there are challenges. With this one, and not to delve too much into the nuts and bolts of it, but it's like you have to build a world. You've got to show new aliens. You've got to introduce new cultures, new species, new all of that. You've got to introduce a sport. You've got to introduce that sport at its highest level. You've got to introduce the rules. How is the game played? Who are the players? What are the plays called like? How does the strategy work? And you haven't even gotten to the actual story that you're there to tell. So trying to balance all of that, within the structure of trying to tell a story that paces well and that readers won't dial out on. It's because, trust me, as a sports writer, like I can write plays all day long. I can create, and Rob, you're the same way, man. I'm sure like we can play in that sandbox all day long, but it's about taking that and creating it and crafting it in such a way that a reader who may or may not have much of a sports acumen can read that and be able to see in their mind's eye exactly what's going on the field at any given time. Like that's the challenge, is knowing your audience and being able to write in such a way that everybody can get in on the story and be able to go along for the ride. So a lot of edits on this one, a lot of balancing, a lot of horse trading on, okay, what can I cut out of this 5-paragraph piece of exposition about Warball? What can go so that I can make this 3 and get back into the scene? So definitely a challenge, but I think one that hopefully, guys, is going to be worth the wait. In other news, Shark Flight Media, we're growing, boys and girls. We are now ready to add yet another title to our banner, and that is in the form of the Future Books podcast with Randall Willis. So breaking a little bit of news tonight. That show is going to be coming to Shark Flight Media starting in August. And we're going to be partnering with Randy to basically give readers and listeners a glimpse of what is coming down the pike from CKP. So, whereas Jeremy and the gang over at the CKP YouTube really are doing an exquisite job on live, large and in charge. Here's what's happening now. Come talk to authors now. Here's what's going on. we're going to be the show that kind of looks forward and gives you the scoop on, okay, here's what's coming down the pike. Here's the schedule for this month. Here are going to be some author interviews for some things that readers haven't had a chance to lay eyes on yet, and just basically set the table for a lot of the stuff that Jeremy and the gang are doing over at CKP YouTube. So really excited about that. Randy and I have been bouncing emails and texts and phone calls the last couple of days and kind of lining up how we want to set it up, how we want to image it, how we want to push it and promote it, and, you know, lining up guests and doing that. So really excited to take that on and just bring yet a new property to the folks at CKP and the fans of CKP. So we really, really hope you guys like it. But thanks to Randy for agreeing to work with me on that. He's a good sport and a dude I always like dealing with. So good people there. All right, now I'm going to look for my my pod mail segment. Sounder. I really do got to get one of those soundboard guys. Oh.
You got mail.
All right, pod mail segment. That's where we hear from our listeners, man. What is it you guys wanted to talk to us about? Before we do that, definitely want to say thanks to the folks over at the International Association of Science Fiction and Fantasy Authors. They are the ones who promote this particular segment. So thanks to them for that. Can't say it enough, guys. Go check them out online, iasfa.org. It doesn't matter if you're a writer or a reader. They got stuff for you, right? If you're a writer, they got community. Go sign up for an account. It's free. Meet authors, learn new things about your craft, network. All right. Learn tips of the trade. It's all there. If you're a reader, they got stuff going on every single month in the way of book promos, giveaways, the whole nine. Happening this month, for instance, what do we got going on this month? This would be a massive sci-fi short story giveaway, and that is going to be happening from July 24th to 28th. So right around the corner. Make sure you go to iasfa.org, sign up for the giveaway, and sign up for the newsletter while you're there, because that's where you're going to find out about all of the stuff that is going to happen at IASFA. So again, guys, you can't beat free books, right? Particularly when times are tight, free books are there. Those folks are there for you. That site, one more time, is iasfa.org. That's the International Association of Science Fiction and Fantasy Authors. So our first question comes to us from Mark with USC and UCLA making the jump to the Big Ten. It seems that the table is now set for the mass set of realignment that college football has been looking to for years. Who do you expect to be the next dominoes to fall, and how do you see all of this shaking out? Kev, I'll start with you, man. What was your first reaction when you saw that USC and UCLA were going to the Big Ten?
Well, I mean, that whole conference needs everything it can get. I mean, just scrape together and check out the muscles on a few of the male cheerleaders and bring them on too, because they're not going to compete with the SEC.
Yes. Ohio State, Michigan, none of those guys are any good at all.
No, here's what's going to happen. Listen,
they're no good at all. I mean, Ohio State's won like 3 national championships in the last 8 years.
Those guys. They're up north. They're up north. Okay.
They're also about to have a crap ton more money than you. Just saying.
No, not more than UGA. Nobody has more money than UGA. Come on.
That's wrong. But go ahead.
What's going to happen? I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen with all the changing and realigning? It's that whole NIL thing, and it's just I don't know. All I can do is sit back and watch and root for my team, because it is just crazy what's going on.
Right. Well, depending on what stat you read. The SEC currently gets, I believe it's $80 million per school per year from their television deal from ESPN. Contrast that with the ACC, Florida State, it's about 32, a little bit of a disparity there. And now with the addition of USC and UCLA and adding the Los Angeles market, the Big Ten, rumor has it, is going to be commanding upwards of $100 million per from Fox. So that's a lot of money, dude. I mean, a crap ton of money. And to this guy's point, I do believe it's the tip of the iceberg. I do think we are headed toward 2, maybe 3 mega conferences, but I think it's going to be 2 in the form of the SEC and the Big Ten. And it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. As far as the other dominoes that could fall, I mean, obviously everybody's looking to see what's going to go on with Oregon and Washington. Anytime you've got Phil Knight in control at Oregon and Eugene, they're not going to stay put for long. They will go somewhere. The Pac-12 is now done. So the only question is whether or not they're going to say, please take us to Big Ten, which they very may well do, or they're going to try and jump in with the Big 12, who then in turn could try and make some sort of pact with the ACC, which is circling the drain, thankfully, In the immortal words of the great philosopher and cosmic pimp, James T. Kirk, let them die. That is my word for the ACC. Hopefully that will let the schools in the ACC out that are ready to go play big boy football, and we can go get paid too, because then we'll be able to compete with the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States and the USCs. That would be nice.
Maybe they can figure out some way to have the ACC be for basketball, because they dominate over that way.
Yeah, and there's talk of
leave them
that.
alone when football. Let them do their other thing.
Yeah.
But the ACC basketball is, I mean, there's no doubt that's
yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and
there's
a lot
of
Midwest
chatter about
stuff,
that.
obviously.
Yeah.
Some Midwest stuff here with KU and Wichita State, some other teams that have been, competing pretty well in this neck of the woods in basketball, but football hadn't happened. So there probably is going to be some differentiation there. Already there is some with the league Wichita State's in as they climb the ladder. I will say I'm loving it, honestly. I'm sure that this messes with Ian's head a little bit, but
I hate it. It sucks. They're killing my sport. But go ahead.
I don't think they're killing it. I think they're reinventing it. And the reason why I say that is because what the NCAA has been is a pile of stinking crap, and it needs essentially a revolution to get rid of that pile of stinking crap and come up with something that may actually be useful for the students, for the fans, for the quote unquote universities, because they really don't. I mean, it
doesn't have anything to do with the universities.
Yeah,
anymore,
I get that. But for the people who are part of the university, it does matter if you're on campus somewhat from the standpoint of how it affects your life there.
Mm-hmm.
The point is the NCAA is a business model that has needed to die for quite some time. We are in the midst of its dying and rebirth into something that may actually be useful. And I don't know how it's going to shake out, and it may end up being worse, but it's kind of hard for it to be worse than what the NCAA was in terms of.
Well, but I mean, it can cease to exist. And I know that this is crazy talk for a lot of people, but just follow me down the rabbit hole. Right? How many people do you know that will happily tell you, I just like college ball better than pro ball? I really do. I just enjoy the college game and the college experience more than pro ball. And the more that the powers that be in the television networks continue to drag this toward being what it is, which is NFL light, at what point do those fans then put their hand up and say, listen, why am I watching this now? I'll just go watch the NFL where there's a salary cap and smaller teams aren't going to stay bad for long because there's a salary cap and because we're going to get the first pick in the draft and we just hired a new coach and we're going to pay him the going rate that everybody else is paying their coaches. Everything is level and we can just play ball. I don't know that you're going to have that in college ball. I don't know that it's possible. Nobody can out NFL the NFL. And the more you try to do that, the more you try and become that model, I think the less relevant you make yourself. It's just my argument.
I think that the difference in the two models, in your pro and your college. In your pro, okay, I'm a fan of the Falcons. Cool, the Falcons. They got 150 people in the organization. It's the Falcons. But at UGA, my daughter went there.
Right.
Okay, I know people that went there. There's 30,000 students between online and not that are going there, and they feel a part of it. Right. And next year there'll be 30,000, and the next, and 10 years from now, how much alumni, how many, and they're a part of it. You're not. Right. I'm not a part of the Falcons, even though they're my favorite team. I never have been, never will be, and that's going to be the difference where it won't go that way. I feel.
I got you.
And here's one other thing, because of the number of TV channels that are out there, it's not like we're going to be limited to just NFL, XFL, USFL, NCAA top tier with the SEC and the Big Ten and whatever. We're going to we already do get to see things like the Missouri Valley Conference, which I've enjoyed that on free ESPN Plus. You don't even have to pay for that, and you get to watch and start liking some of these teams. I think what's going to happen is that we're going to start seeing tiers of professionalism, right, and that the UGAs are going to be in that somewhere professional, somewhere around the not quite a minor league like what you've talked about, Ian, with the XFL and the USFL, but still somewhere in that range. And then that college experience that we talk about wanting to watch, we're not going to get it from KU. We're not going to get it from, in basketball either. We're going to get it from the teams that are a little
Campbell
bit
versus Georgia Southern. Yeah.
Right.
And probably Wake Forest versus, Western Carolina.
And it's not like the TV's not going to show all that. We're going to have that as an option constantly, where we didn't have it, where we didn't have it 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's
We'll
true.
see.
Because the NFL, you got two games on at 1 o'clock unless you have the NFL Network.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. All right. Next question comes to us from Amy. I've heard you guys talk about Pensic on this show before. I'm assuming that's some sort of con. What exactly is that? Rob, that's all you, man.
Me, you're sure this was, yeah.
Pretty sure that one's all you, bud.
Pensic. Pensic is the Pennsylvania War in the SCA. That's the Society of Creative Anachronism. They have a series of annual wars, which are basically, they get together and a bunch of people hit each other with sticks, and then people camp, and there's all sorts of arts and sciences that get done, and all sorts of medieval or medieval-like activities, along with just hanging out with friends that you've known for mumbled years. There'll be people there I've known for 25 years at this point. So this is 10,000 people camping in a Pennsylvania forest. It really does become a town in Pennsylvania for those 2 weeks, because it goes from essentially a couple hundred people living in the area to over 10,000, and it's a really neat experience. It's something that I've gone to now 20 plus times. And again, a lot of the SCA in general anymore for me is I get to go see people I see once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And, he was talking about that with Dragon Con earlier. It really is. You make these friendships, and we get so much. It's nice to see people on Facebook and stuff like that. I was just talking with a buddy of mine from Canada, and I'll get to see him in a couple of weeks, and I'll get to hang out a bunch of Canadian friends that I literally haven't seen since the last Pensic, which canceled, get a couple of canceled. It's been years since some of my closest friends and I have actually sat around and given each other hell. I am so looking forward to this.
Cool.
Wait, a quick question on Pensic, real quick, because
Sure.
I've never been. 10,000 people show up into a small town like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are some events in some places, I won't name what type of crowd it is or not, that it looks like a disaster after 10,000 people.
Oh, it doesn't.
But in Pensic, it strikes me as the kind of people that pick up everything around them before they leave, and it may look better than before they got there.
It's not entirely like that, simply because the dumpsters at the end everything is at the dumpsters, but the dumpster, sometimes there's a lot of stuff and there's stuff
but
stacked
not around the
dump.
campsites, right?
No. Well, one of the things that we traditionally put into each other, sort of as an operational ethos, is that we've packed our tent, we've pulled up at the tarp, the place that we've lived in for the last 2 weeks. We routinely, generally speaking, we'll do a walkthrough. Did we leave any beer bottle caps? Now, to be honest, I have camped, generally speaking, at exactly the same place at these events for years. You kind of get into, like, literally, this is where my camp is. And I will freely admit that every once in a while I will go back and, there's that steak that I couldn't find when I was trying to dig everything up, because it was hidden in the grass and it was buried. But to be honest, we do really put our money where our mouth is when trying to clean up. One last thing I should mention is I'll be there this year selling for the first time in my own booth, which actually means I am moving my tent from where it's been for the last 20 years. But for the last few years, I've been selling out of a buddy's tent, and it's turned out really well, because I'll sit there, and if nobody's there buying, I get to write, and if somebody's there buying, I get to sell. So I'm either writing or selling the entire time. I'll be using this laptop that I'm on right now, as a matter of fact, to throw a bunch of words on the page. So it's not only is it's kind of the ideal world for me, because I get my 8-9 hours of work and productivity and come out with words and come out with sales. And then afterwards, I get to go back and do the singing of songs and the hanging around fires and talking with my friends. It's ideal for me.
Cool. Next question comes to us from Kez. Hey guys, I'm a fellow author and who just put out his first book in urban fantasy. I'm thinking of starting a podcast to promote my book. Any recommendations for a newbie? Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of folks are doing it. We do that right here on this podcast. Obviously, we promote a lot of our own stuff every episode. I think the one bit of advice I would give you is twofold. One, invest in some good equipment. Get yourself a good, decent USB mic. You don't have to go full bore with the, a whole lot of gear, but invest in a good mic. Make sure you've got a laptop that's got enough horsepower to be able to process audio and video, and then take some time to really master your craft. So, obviously I'm still learning this whole video thing, evidenced by the bugs that we've had in our last 2 episodes, but audio, I love it. I've played with that for years. I use an open source editor called Audacity. That's a very powerful tool, does everything I need it to do. And it's awesome. It's got a multi-track system. It's got effects. It's got EQs. It's got everything I need. But learning a piece of software like that does take a little bit of time. Invest that time. The other thing I would tell you is really know who you want to talk to with your audience. Do some research on them and make sure you're gearing your content toward that crew. All right. Rob and I knew early on that we were both sports fans. And then lo and behold, we'd sit around cons and talk about sports. And then people would come over and start talking about sports with us. And so it became very apparent there was a crew, there was a niche crowd there in that sci-fi group that, you know what, they like to talk about beer, barbecue, and football too. And so the Dudes in Hyperspace was born, and that's what this show is aimed at. So spend a little bit of money on a gear, specifically a good computer and a good mic, and then know your audience. It's a good way to go. Guys, you got anything else you want to add to this guy before I move on to our last question?
I will give one thing that I think, and this is just a general viewpoint of podcasts. The podcasts I like the best are 2 or 3 people like what we're doing here who are really good at interacting with each other. Because not everybody, and there's a variety of reasons. But one, maybe I'm having a bad day and Kevin's all excited about a new release or something, and he's covering for me because his energy is there. It happens. Plus, sometimes it's me feeding off of what they're saying, and maybe you get stuck on what you're trying to say, and it becomes kind of scripted because you write stuff down and it becomes kind of wooden. And I think the best podcasts are the ones where you have constant interaction with people who are comfortable with each other. And obviously Kevin and Ian and I, we've been friends for 4 or 5 years now, and we've drunk a lot of beverages together and eaten a lot of food together and had a lot of fun times together. And I think that helps us, even if we're 1,000 miles apart as we are right now.
Yep, absolutely. Kev, anything you want to throw in?
I think you guys nailed it pretty well. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, our last question comes to us from Brent. Excuse me, that was Brent. This is Carl, I believe it is. Well, crap, fellas. It looks like NASCAR is going street racing in Chicago after all. Is there any possible way whatsoever that this actually turns out okay? I don't think so. I think it's going to suck, to be honest with you. Street races are notoriously boring to watch. They're beautiful. I mean, they're very scenic. They're very cool to look at. They're also a blast to go party at. The racing sucks. It's not a surface made for racing, no matter how you gear it. It's tight corners, it's tight quarters. There's no passing. Like the race is won at qualifying. Most Formula One races, like it's won at qualifying, particularly when you start looking at a place like Monaco. Add to that the fact that there's no way stock cars can put on a street racing product like what you're going to get from F1 and IndyCar. And I think this is a stupid idea born from a leadership group that is just scrambling to get someone to like them. That's what this is about. So I've made no bones, particularly for those who follow me on social media. I don't particularly like the crew running NASCAR right now. I think they're heading in the wrong direction. I still root for a lot of the little guys like Corey LaJoy and the people out there who really still make a go of it. But by and large, I think this sport's being led by the wrong people making bad decisions. And this is yet another glaring example of that. I know that they would champion the whole, we're going to try something new. We need to reach new audiences. Well, congratulations. You went to the LA Coliseum. You couldn't even sell that out. And it was what, 2/3 capacity because you had to strip out the last, the bottom 15,000 seats to be able to build the track. And you still couldn't sell it out. Let's see what that attendance looks like in year 2 when you go back in February and half those fans have seen the monkeys throw poo and they don't show up now. You got to give them free tickets. It's going to be the same thing in Chicago. This is not what NASCAR does. And the more they try, the more they present themselves as that goofy kid at the party who's just trying to dress the right way and say the right things and conduct himself in the right way because he thinks he's got a shot to go home with the prom queen, the more they just proceed to make idiots out of themselves. So no, I don't believe this is going to work out well. Like I said, with the Coliseum race, people will show up year one because everybody likes to watch the monkeys throw poo at each other at the circus. Then you've seen it and you're bored and you don't go back unless you just want to party. But television ratings, I'm not going to watch this race. I don't like parades. They're boring to me. Kev, what you got?
I have never, ever been a road race fan in NASCAR. Never.
Yeah.
I don't care anything about them. I just don't. Oh, what's a what? Road race? No, I'm not watching that.
Yeah.
And
this is
I'm
going
just
to
that
be
way.
a street race.
Yeah.
Like at least at a place, at some of these tracks, you've got a little bit of wiggle room, on the straightaways where some passing can happen. But by and large, I mean, you look at the race at Road America last weekend, it was a boring freaking race to watch. It wasn't fun. It was a snooze fest.
No,
And God bless those fans for showing out in droves because the race was awful.
Yeah, I'm a short track guy.
Yep.
And that comes from my, growing up plus throughout the years of going to the dirt track on a Saturday, like in Phoenix City, Alabama, where they have the Southeast Alabama Championship. Dirt track, small track. I mean, that's racing to me.
Yeah.
Used to be the Have a Tampa series and Scott Bloomquist and all those guys. Yes, that's for me.
Yep.
I don't care nothing about the road race.
I don't either. And particularly a street race is a bad idea. Very bad idea. Rob, I know you're not a NASCAR fan, but you are a sports fan and you do have a pretty good mind for sports business. So this whole idea of, broaching new markets and trying to bring new fans to your sport, is there any way in your mind as an outsider looking in on this that you could see this actually working out? Or are these people just, pardon the pun, spinning their wheels for ideas before their sport goes belly up?
I would go with the latter. Honestly,
Yeah.
I have some neat ideas about what I would think would be awesome and fun. And I would actually love to see road racing work because I get bored with just going around in circles when I watch NASCAR. I mean, I get the tactics. You can focus in on the tactics a little bit better around those curves and things like that. And I get that those exist, even though I don't grok them as well as you guys do. I do think there would be some neat courses out there, but your point that I would have never thought of as a non-viewer of racing consistently, of the tight turns and the tight challenges of Chicago, of downtown Chicago, which is undoubtedly where they're going to do it because, that's what everybody thinks of. So they're going to think the Sears Tower and Soldier Field and the aquarium and all that. And those are neat places to go visit, but they're not necessarily neat places to go visit at 190 miles an hour.
Right.
I mean, as you were talking about what you were saying, I was thinking, there is a way to make this work, except you'd have to have a whole bunch of police cars crashing, and just to redo the Blues Brothers.
I've seen that somewhere.
Yeah. But when I was thinking that suggestion, you kind of blew all that out of the water with your monkey poo flinging stuff. So I think I'm going to leave it at. I think what you've got here is executives at NASCAR flinging poo because they don't. Yeah. They want to see what sticks, honestly.
Not everybody can be the NFL. Not everybody is going to be mainstream sport. But you know what? And I've said this until I'm blue in the face with these guys. You can still be a very healthy, very profitable sport with a great sized audience. Okay.
And one other thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, that you can't. Hey, we picked up 20,000 new fans. Outstanding. You lost 80,000 because of what you did.
Well, I mean, quantifying that is a bit of a chore, but that's again why I go to optics and ticket sales. All right. When I watched the Coliseum race again, right, they had to take, I guess it was a good chunk of the lower bowl that they had to cordon off to build the track and then to make sure that there was proper safety space there, right? Because stuff's going to fly up off the track. You don't want hitting people. All right. So now your stadium that seats 80,000, now you're down to 60. And there were still huge gaps in the stands. It's because you're in Los Angeles, man. And I know it's the second largest television market on the planet and everybody wants to be there. The mainstream sports populace of Los Angeles, freaking California, is never going to embrace NASCAR. And that's okay. People in Miami the mass sports populace in Miami are never going to embrace hockey. It's just different strokes, man.
And it's not just NASCAR in Los Angeles, because we hear all the time about all those, where are all the people going to Dodgers games? I mean, that's a great team. Where are all the people going to Angels games, or Rams, Chargers? They're all having problems because that city, they don't, as a whole, they don't show up in the numbers at the events the way they do. They are tremendous TV market. There's no doubt about it. And having the Chargers and the Rams there definitely makes the market stronger for what they're selling. But every sport that I can think of has always talked about, well, I wish we'd get better in-person attendance at Los Angeles stuff. So I don't know. I wouldn't have picked that for that reason either. There are ways to get people involved. I think NASCAR is a neat sport in many ways, but you got to grok it. And like every sport, like I'm a big follower of soccer, and that's because I kind of grok how the sight lines go, the attack lines go in the triangles. I'm not an expert, but I can watch it and grok it. But I can't do that with NASCAR, so I don't like it as much because I don't grok it. And until people grok it,
define that for people who don't know what grokking it is.
So, I use that term a lot. I'm sorry, it's a Heinlein term, and it basically means not only do you understand it, but you get it and you understand it. It's more than just understanding. It's a deeper, like you never have to question if you understand a certain thing. So that's why I use it over understand, because I can understand NASCAR, but I don't grok it. And there's a difference there.
Very, very much. Well,
fellas,
fellas,
it's like football. If you grok football, you understand why they're going for 2 and not kicking the extra point.
Exactly.
Where a casual fan has no clue why they're doing it. Why they're it's only in the third quarter. Why are they? There's a reason.
Right. See, I have that, and Chris Kennedy and I have talked about this on numerous occasions. I am that way with hockey. Like, I understand the basics of the game, but to me, it looks like skates in a blender. Like, it's just, I don't see, and that, don't get me, I am not taking anything away from it. I completely realize there's a world of strategy and very well thought out, executed stuff that happens in the game of hockey, the way you manage your lines, the way you manage your time. Like, there's a whole world of strategy and philosophy out there that I just don't understand, but I just don't get it when I watch it.
All that.
But
really quick on this, you just hit on something that changes understanding to grokking. And it is this: you guys grew up and you actually went to races, so you could see more than just the television shows on the screen, right? You could actually understand more of the technique that's going on around the entirety of it. I'm the same way with hockey. I'm the same way with soccer. I've been to enough of those games that while the camera may be focusing on where the ball is, I'm oftentimes watching where a guy's making a run down the other sideline to create an angle in soccer. And the way they get those overlapping rushes in hockey that you can't always see because the television shows. So I grew up watching those sports like live in Wichita. So I grok those better than, and I've never been to a race. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been to a race of any type, horse, any kind of car. I don't think I like
to take you to a dirt track sometime.
There you go.
I'd love to go.
Well, and listen, for folks who want road racing, and I know I said this at the outset of this, and I truly believe it. All right, go watch open wheel racing. If you want to watch road course racing at its finest, you don't watch NASCAR. You watch Formula One. All right. There's a reason why those guys traveling the world racing that style of racing. It's because they are the best at what they do in cars that NASCAR drivers only dream of racing. That doesn't mean that NASCAR is an inferior form of racing. It's a completely different discipline of racing. There are guys who come over from F1 that can't sniff 30th in a stock car because it's a completely different style of racing. IndyCar is the same way, man. And for my money, IndyCar is the best of both worlds. Those guys run ovals and they run road and street courses. You got to be good at all of it to be a champion at IndyCar. That's why I love that series. It's great stuff over there. So, all right. Well, that is definitely bringing us down way past the hour. So speaking of racing, let's wave some white flag.
White flag.
White flag is a segment where we talk about the stuff that's on our radar. Kev, I'll start with you, man. What's coming up? I know you said you got a couple of cons, but what's happening in your world with writing right now?
Talking to me? Talking to me?
Yep.
I just finishing up that fantasy book that I'm gonna get turned in here next couple of weeks. Gonna start a salvage book. Gonna start a new trilogy in salvage, so I'll start one. Rob's clicking in and out there. Gonna start a salvage book, and that's about it. I got a project that I'm getting ready to work on for an anthology. I'm going to do an anthology in salvage. So
Okay.
there's going to be some invites. I'm going to have 4 open slots. This is the first time I've ever done it with a salvage book.
Okay.
It's always been invites. There's always been so many that want to get in, and there's probably going to be a lot of people disappointed because I'm only doing one salvage book, and so I can only invite so many.
Right.
So I got to talk with the big boss and get some strategy going there. And then I got another project going on that I'll do an anthology for. I've talked to the boss, and once we get that finalized, I'll be announcing that later. So,
Cool. Yeah, I've heard rumblings about that particular project, and that does sound really exciting. Folks are gonna love that. Rob, how about you, man? What's happening other than Penzic?
Well, first of all, I'm trying to figure out which one is the mute and which one is the stop video button. Like what happened there with Kevin. I was trying to hit the mute, so I wasn't getting any noise on your end. Writing, actually, I have been on an editing kick to catch up some things, and I haven't been writing much more than a couple thousand words a week because I've just been throwing myself at editing.
Yeah.
But I'm on on the other side of that curve, and got a bunch of ideas that have been clicking in my head. And over the next 3 weeks, I expect to get quite a few words written. I'm not entirely sure where they're going to go into which project, because I've got so many ideas flooding through my head right now that a lot of what I just want to do is start throwing chapters on the page, and they may very well be, let's a chapter for the Four Horsemen universe, and it may be on my next Eldritch Legacy book, and it may be on something else, and who knows? But I've got these ideas, and they just need to get out because I really haven't had time to devote to it. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Penzic is again a place where I can sit and write, and kind of have plenty of time to do what I need to do. With writing, and so it's always been a fruitful one for me. So that's what I'm really looking forward to on that side of things.
Awesome. Well, work just continues on Last Argonaut. Thankfully, I am through the bulk of my con schedule until I get to some local events here in Panama City, but more on that later. Thanks so much again to Jim Nettles for coming on the program to talk barbecue and virtual cons with us. What a wealth of information, guys. Seriously, if you listen to this and didn't take notes, go back and listen to it again. Take notes. There was gold in them there hills, man. Thanks to Rob Howe. Thanks to Kevin Steverson. Thanks to our sponsors. That, of course, being Chris Kennedy Publishing. You can find more about them at chriskennedypublishing.com and the International Association of Science Fiction and Fantasy Authors. Folks, jump in. Sci-Fi Short Story Giveaway happening next week. Check it out. iasfa.org. As for the show, you know how to support us on YouTube now, people. Hey, like the show. Subscribe to the channel. It helps to bump us up to the rankings. Same on Apple, Google, Spotify, all the audio platforms. If you can leave 5 stars in a review, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So again, for Kev, for Rob, I am Ian J. Malone. We'll see you next time. The Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. See ya.